Welcome to the Man Mode Podcast, the show where we have real conversations about men's mental health, fatherhood, and manhood. Here we share the stories of everyday men across America, their struggles, their triumphs, and their truths. This is about breaking silence, building strength, and redefining what it means to be a man today. You're listening to the Man Mode Podcast. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of the Man Mode Podcast, where we talk about men's mental health, fatherhood, manhood, and I guess everything in between, really, when it comes to matters of men and men's mental health. Today, I'm really excited to introduce Kevin Whitsell. And Kevin, why don't you go ahead and give yourself a brief introduction?
So my name's Kevin. I am a paramedic, longtime paramedic from the Memphis, Tennessee area. I have a podcast as well called A Silent War Within, and we talk about first responder mental health. I'm also in leadership. I'm also a very deeply rooted Christian guy, religious guy. That's kind of one of my hobbies is studying scripture and knowing about scripture. So I like that part of it too. Also, I'm a student of leadership. I never say that I am a actual full-blown leader because I don't think I'll ever get there. I think that I have a lot to learn and will be a student of leadership for a very long time.
That's awesome. So your podcast is about first responders' mental health along with healthcare workers as well, right?
Absolutely.
I'm sure you have some pretty interesting stories with that. But I guess to begin with, where were you born and raised?
So I was actually born down in, I guess you say, central Mississippi. It's a little town called Grenada. It's right in between Memphis, Tennessee and Jackson, Mississippi. I was born into kind of a weird situation. My mom was 16 years old when she conceived me, and they were part of a deeply rooted Southern Baptist church. So you can imagine how that went over. She was kind of ostracized from the church in a lot of ways, and I'm not going to say it's because of that, but certainly had a role in it. She and my dad got married young, split. She got on drugs and alcohol very badly. Dad tried to get away from that as quickly as possible, and because it was a kind of a dangerous living situation for my sister and I, my great aunt actually got custody of us when I was 2. My dad was an over-the-road truck driver, so he never could actually be home enough to have custody granted to him. So yeah, it's a very interesting story. It was one of those that, looking back, I'm happy for, but it definitely caused a lot of struggle in the growing up time. And in the meantime, to get to here, there was a lot of hard times, lots of family drama, of course. There was just a lot. Growing up was tough. We had it good. Don't get me wrong. We had, my great aunt and uncle were great to us, and I kind of give her a lot of the credit for making me the man I am today. So she did a great job, and I'm so thankful for her, because if it wasn't for her, I don't know where I'd be. I may be on the streets like my mom was until she died last year. And she died of a drug overdose, even years and years and years later. I mean, she was a drug addict for a solid 30 years.
Yeah, that seems to be one of those common themes here. I'll just throw mine out there. So like all my family on my mama's side's from Southern West Virginia. Yeah. And it's kind of a similar thing with a lot of my family, my aunts and uncles. Out of all of the brothers and sisters, my mom is the only one that has not been addicted to any sort of substance or has not been into jails or anything like that. And I mean, I've still got a couple of aunts and uncles that are still living, but they don't look the best, because it's just drugs. It just seems to get a hold of families really quick.
Yeah, my mom at 47 years old, that was, that would have been 8 years ago now. at 47 years old, looked like she was 70. I mean, her face was just, no teeth, wrinkled. I mean, just years of drug use. And that's
Yeah.
partially why I think that she, not only the drugs, but she had many, 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 many health problems to go on top of a really bad drug addiction. And her drug of choice was always meth and alcohol mixed. I mean, if she could get her hands on
Mm.
those two combos, she was set.
Yeah, that's kind of the. I mean, it's not. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm
No,
laughing
I
because
get it.
I'm relating
I
to it
get it.
because it's it's crazy. I've got several cousins that are doing the same kind of stuff, and what really strikes me as strange is all of us grew up in church,
Oh yeah.
and we grew up hearing the word, hearing the gospel, and I I have no explanations as to why you know drugs just seem to get a hold of these people, and it never lets go. It never lets go.
But you're right, but I'm also very proud to say that guys like you and I are breaking a generational curse in our family because I mean, my family is riddled with it. I mean, we even went back and traced the lineage, and even back in the late 1800s, you could find files of the Whitsels being charged with public drunkenness and lewdness and all kind of things.
Oh
So, I
wow.
mean, my dad and I are the generational curse breakers because everybody before us was just live that life, and we don't. I mean, we never have. And my dad's not college educated per se, but when you look at what I think of as success is not necessarily money or fame. It's taking care of your family and being a good father. And even though my dad, not by any choice of his own, was not present for me a lot of my younger years, he got a local job when I was about 10, but I don't remember any of that. And he was a great dad from the time he was around, even until now. I mean, he's my best friend. I mean, he and I talk every day.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. My dad, he lives out in New Mexico, and so I grew up without my dad like physically there, but he was like always there, just not physically. He was in the military
Right.
for the entirety of my childhood. Um, that's where him and Mama met, was in the Army, and Mama got out. I guess women can get the childbearing women can get the option to get out of the military. Um, at that time, I don't know if it's like that now, but that's how it was then. And dad stayed in. So whenever my parents split, dad stayed in Texas. We came to North Carolina, and for the most part, that's kind of where I've been. But it's I like what you said there, how we're breaking the generational curse and we're trying to change. Just we're trying to break the generational trauma that comes from it, and that's what it is. It causes trauma among families.
Absolutely. And a lot of
And
it. I
I
mean,
go ahead.
I can remember times that I didn't know it then, but looking back now, man, we had a traumatic childhood. I didn't realize it in the moment, but man, looking back, we went through some stuff. And you
Yeah.
just never think, as a kid, you don't think, oh, this is traumatic. But especially as an adult, going to counseling and therapy and the things that I have gone to for different things, you start digging in. You're like, oh, it's because of my messed up childhood that's a thing.
Yeah.
It's because I got messed up young.
Yeah, you don't think about it until a decade or two down the road,
Yeah.
and it brings it all up, and I'll notice it, or not so much now, but I used to notice it in just like my regular conversations with my friends in my early 20s. They'd kind of look at me funny. I won't go into details,
Yeah. No, I get it.
just to
I
just to
get
save
it.
a little bit of time. But
I get
it's
it.
it's
I
just
do.
yeah, it's been a whirlwind dealing with those things, and I've been in counseling and therapy myself for these kind of issues. So yeah, no, that's a really cool,
And it's really
maybe not
one of the
cool
things.
comparison.
Well, yeah, but it's really one of the things that we talk about a lot on A Silent War Within is the fact that, like, maybe the reason that some of us got into this profession, and of course I'm a paramedic, I've been a firefighter in the past, um, have multiple friends from different, obviously working in this 20 years. I've got friends in law enforcement and all the other public service avenues. I'm married to a nurse. Um, but I think part of the reason that this industry and this business of first responders attract such broken people is because we desire to be what we didn't have. So the episode that comes out this Friday with a radiology tech that's pretty popular on TikTok named Catherine, we have this really deep conversation. It was a great conversation, but one of the things that came from it was this idea of, like, if you poll all the first responders and all of healthcare, you're going to end up, and when you look at professional statistics, you end up seeing that somewhere around, depending on what study you look at, somewhere around 80% of us had some type of trauma that happened in our childhood. It could be
80%.
80%. It could be one large traumatic event, like a car wreck or something that kind of catapulted us into the field. Or it can be, like me, a childhood of just over and over and over trauma that you didn't realize was trauma, but it took something away from your innocence. It took something away from your childhood. And now you have this desire to be what you didn't have. One of the things that she mentioned was turning to alcohol, and I went through a divorce and did the same thing. You know, me and my first wife divorced, and man, I buried myself as far down in a bottle as I could get. And it wasn't that I was trying to get drunk. It was just that I was trying to go to sleep. I just wanted something to dim the pain enough to just be able to sleep. And you see a lot of responders that kind of lean that way, and you always see these responders that once you dig into what they're saying and once you dig into what they're feeling, and I run the peer support for the company that I work for now, and once you really start to dig into people's emotions, what you typically find is there's a lot bigger issue on the backside that you don't realize when they're acting the way they're acting or saying what they're saying. There's something bigger there. And it's one of the things that's interested me for a long time is that we typically get into this field because we have such a strong desire to help people, because either nobody validated us, nobody fought for us, you know, we were missing a parent. There was always something in there that we want to be that for somebody else.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I have a couple of individuals in my family. They are like not first cousins, like second cousins.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, he was a police officer, and he got shot in the line of duty, and it caused him to be paralyzed from the waist down.
That's awful.
I think he passed away. Unfortunately, last year. I think he passed away last year. I was close to him in my childhood, not so much in my adult years. I think he moved, or I don't know the exact story, but I have to get with my mama on that. She keeps tabs back home. I don't.
Yeah.
I got 3 kids, so
we barely keep tabs on ourselves, much less anybody else.
Yeah, for real, absolutely. But no, that's some similarities there with what you were telling me in that story. How you talking about how you found yourself at the bottom of several bottles with your divorce. I was the same way. I was the same exact way. I would go over to Buffalo Wild Wings, which was right across the street from my mom's little 1-bedroom apartment where I was staying at when I got the boot out of the house.
Yeah.
In one sitting, and this would be 4 to 5 nights a week. It'd be just about every night. In one sitting, I'd have 13 LITs.
Good mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was always Jack Daniel's honey. I would, because it was easy drinking, so it was sweet. It had a
Yeah.
sweetness to it. So I
Yeah.
mean, I would drink a half a bottle and go to sleep, and then the next night I'd do it again. Sometimes I'd have a whole bottle. It was never any. It wasn't any prescription dose for me. It was just whatever I felt enough to go to sleep. So
Right. And then I'd go over to my brother's. He's not like by blood, he's not my brother, but he's my brother.
I get it. I got some of those too.
I would go over to his house on the weekends, and me and him would drink a whole half gallon of Jack. It's actually crazy that I never had to have my stomach pumped. And
It is.
thinking about the highway that I would have to cross to get from my mama's apartment to Buffalo Wild Wings, it is truly a miracle from the good Lord upstairs that I didn't end up getting hit by a car. Because there'd be several nights or several mornings I'd wake up on my mama's couch. I don't know when I got there. I don't know how I got there. I just found myself waking up there, and it was like that for
Too.
it was like that for several months, at least
Yeah.
4 to 5 months. I would say I was like that. And Mama tells me all the time, like, I just let you do it because you were going to snap at me and snip at me if I said anything to you, and I feel bad about that now. But
Well,
so
it's also how guys like us learn too. We have to do it our way and learn the hard way and get our teeth kicked in a few times, and then we're like, oh, I shouldn't do that.
yeah, no, shouldn't do that. And I definitely wasn't reading my Bible at the time either.
Yeah.
If I
No,
was,
the
I
Bible-
probably would have handled it a lot better.
Yeah, the Bible was one of the furthest things from. I love it now. It's one of my passions, but back then it was not in the vocabulary to think about picking up a Bible.
Yeah. Now my dad, he's a very good, kind man, but he's not somebody who's reading the Bible. He believes in everything, but he thinks that's about as far as he needs to go with it. And Mama raised me in church, but I often wonder how different my dad would have been had he read the Bible and took the gospel seriously. I think about that often, and I try to incorporate the Bible and its teachings and the Word of God into my children. And I'm not the best at it. I told you
Yeah.
off the podcast here, I am a Christian. I don't consider myself a very good one, but I am a Christian, and I try my best with what I got. But I really try to incorporate some of those things into the lives of my kids. For example, we always say blessing before we eat. That's just one of the many things. That's just an example.
Yeah.
But I always make sure everybody's bowing their heads, and we're saying our blessing before we're saying the blessing before we eat. And now my daughter, she just turned 4, and she's really cute. Every time I say, I'll be like, amen, she'll be like, amen, and then she'll start eating.
My 5-year-old does the same thing. Yeah.
It's one of the cutest things, I swear.
I swear if that kid would, he's in the bedroom now because I honestly thought 8:30 my time. So I was like, oh, I can just put him to bed. Well, then I was like, hey, dude, you're going to watch TV in my room. He's like, all right. He's super excited. So he's fine. But yeah, if that kid would live in my skin, I think he would. I think he would just, because he is a daddy's boy and has been from soon after he was through being breastfed. I mean, he just wanted his daddy.
Yeah. That's how my youngest son is.
Yeah.
He loves his mama. Don't get me wrong. He loves his mama.
Absolutely.
It seems like when I come through the door, when I come through the door,
all bets are off.
Running up to me just like that, arms up, ready to go.
Yep.
So, moving on to fatherhood. How many kids do you have?
So I have a 14-year-old daughter from my previous marriage that lives with my wife, still down in Grenada. So about 100 miles from me. I get her every other weekend, and on the weeks that she's off school, we work stuff out. We're really good co-parents in that way. That's been difficult though, and I also have the 5-year-old, so I have 2.
Okay. What was, if you can think back, right, whenever you were having, whenever y'all were having your
Mhm.
oldest, your first one, what was going through your mind on the day that your child was born, your first child?
So, and it's odd that this has been 14 years ago because it feels still fresh. It still
Mm-hmm.
is a memory I can bring up uh, easily. So I was scared. I was excited. I was anxious. I was nervous. My experience taking care of a baby was the few times I had worked in the church nursery. So, I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I kind of, everybody tells you all the things. Well, get ready to lose a lot of sleep, all these things that people tell you to kind of prepare you for fatherhood. They did not prepare me for fatherhood. I started out my fatherhood journey, especially in the days in the hospital and the early days home. So I've always known since I was 15 years old, I've always known what the love of Christ feels like, but I didn't have an understanding of what that was until the first time I laid eyes on my child. Because in that moment, with your wife, after you've been married to her, and even in kind of the latter dating phases, you kind of go through this heart transformation, if you will, to where I'll die for this. You start to realize, like, I love this person enough that I would do anything to save them. But the day you met her, it wasn't like that.
Right.
You may have looked at her and said, this is an attractive girl. I feel like this is going to go somewhere. But if somebody walks in and puts a gun to your head, it's a toss up. At first date, it's a toss up. But once you're married, yes, you'd absolutely die for your spouse. But this kid came into the world and didn't have to earn anything. She already had it from day one. She had it long before she was even in the world. I didn't know what that love felt like until I held her. Now, fast forward, we're home probably 3 or 4 days. And this kid, I remember vividly sitting in, my wife and I both had recliners. And I remember sitting in, my ex-wife now, let me be clear. Uh, we both had recliners and they were kind of sitting in this corner. And I was rocking the baby and we were just taking turns rocking this crying baby because she had colic. So she may have slept 3 hours a day. I mean, it was just, if there is an image of God awful, that was us. And I can remember vividly sitting in those recliners and looking at my ex-wife and going, can we take her back? Because I don't remember her acting this way in the hospital. Because if she was crying too much, the nurses would come in and take care of her and try to soothe her and take her away so mom could get rest, right? We didn't have any nurses at home that could take her away from us and so mom could get rest. We became very irritable. Obviously, we became very hostile toward each other, and I switched off. This is something I have a lot of guilt about, even still today, and I've had to apologize numerous times to my ex-wife for the way that I treated her and my daughter in those first days because I didn't know what I was doing. What I knew is somebody had to bring money into the house, so I just started picking up all the shifts at the ambulance station that I could. And there was one particular incident that really stands out. And Addison, my daughter, was just crying. And my ex-wife had come in late in bed with the baby so that she could kind of soothe and maybe try to get a blink or two of rest. And of course, I had to work the next morning. I said, y'all got to get out of my bed because I'm not going to deal with this crying baby and you complaining. Y'all got to go sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
And when it happened, and my wife now, who is hopefully my forever wife, my wife now, when we first met, she said, I wish I would have met you sooner. And I said, no, you don't, because you wouldn't have liked the man I was. because by the time I met her, I had matured past what I was then. Now, you think about this, I was a 22-year-old dad. Um, I'm a firm believer, just basing this on myself. There's not many people who have great sense at 22 to be a super strong father. Um, so when my son was born, it was that same feeling of immediate love, but I had made a mental change and a heart change and I said after Addison, after we got divorced and went through all the rocky times, and she put forward all the things that she did and that I did, and that caused that huge separation that was just what the court called irreconcilable. Um, so we get divorced, and I just have time to mull through all of this and all the things that she's saying and all the things that I said. And I started thinking back on it, and man, the guilt just started to pour. And we stayed married for, I think we divorced when Addison was 3. Yeah, 3. So we stayed together 3 years, but it was always this strife. It was always this, and we endured multiple bouts from both sides of infidelity, and we were just disconnected. And I think that's kind of what started it in our household, was the fact that, like, I wasn't there for them. I checked out. I mean, I completely checked out. I didn't want anything to do with her. I'd come home, play with her, and I would exit to the bedroom. Like, I tried to be disconnected. So I kind of see both sides of, like, being kind of a crappy dad. And once Malachi, my son, came, I had always said that if I ever get another chance to do this, if God ever permits me to be a father again, a new father again, I'll do it the right way. And by God, every night, my wife's a NICU nurse, so we run our house like a NICU when he was born, because it was 8, 11, 2, 5. That was our feedings, and we were going to be up at 8, 11, 2, 5. It didn't matter if he was up or not. We were waking him up to feed him. It drove me insane, because at the time, I am now because I'm always so busy. But at the time, I was not a schedule guy. Like, you put me on a schedule, I don't like it. Because I come from an industry where, for my whole career, I worked 48 or 72-hour shifts straight, and you're just hanging out at a station for 3 days doing kind of whatever in between calls. You're going to get food. There's no real logic to the way that we work. There's no real parameters. It's just kind of a free for all until the tones go off, and then you go get somebody sick, take them to the hospital, and whatever. So being on a rigid schedule like that was tough. But I made a commitment very early on, and I'm proud to say there was only one time when my wife could not wake me up to come and help feed the baby, because she was pumping and I would feed, and vice versa. After he didn't latch well, my wife got the shingles during breastfeeding, so she had to abruptly stop trying to get him to latch. So she pumped after that, and I would get up and she would pump and I would feed, and I would change and do all the things. And that was the best. I absolutely hate that I missed that time with my daughter, because that time with him was such a good bonding time, such a good play time. And I can still vividly remember the last time. I didn't know it was the last time then, but I can vividly remember the last time he went to sleep in my arms in a rocking chair. And then all of a sudden one day he wants to sleep in the bed with us. And I was just devastated by that. I was like, no, you are not supposed to want to sleep in the bed with us. I want to rock you in the chair. And he's like, no. And every time you go to the chair, he would just kind of, whine and cry. He didn't want to do it. And I was just devastated by that, because that was my little happy place. I could just talk to him, and the conversations that he and I had even before he was old enough to understand what was going on. He was just my little confidant, and I would just tell him everything while I would rock him.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. So how has your profession affected your ability to be the kind of father that you want to be?
So, in this profession, thankfully I had what I would like to call an out. of the actual profession when Malachi was born. But when Addison was born, I was making, get this, $7.15 an hour as an EMT. Now this is somebody who went to school, got my license, you know, during the time I was making that money. I started out at $6.15, so $7.15 was a raise, or $6.25, whatever the minimum wage was then. So I was an EMT making pretty much minimum wage, and I was getting bled on, puked on. I've been shot at, all these things. I actually got beat up on a scene one day, so much to the fact that it broke this orbital socket right here by a patient. Patient was intoxicated on PCP, under the influence, and PCP's wild, man. He picked me up over his head and threw me in the yard, and I'm a big guy. Like I'm not tiny by any means. And I was, I've stayed right around. I bounced between 3 and 350, and he was able to chunk me in the yard like a, small wrestler.
Wow.
But during that time, when I was on the truck all the time, it was very difficult to be the dad I wanted. Not only because of my mental capacity to be a dad and my heart posture to be a dad, because it was very different back then. But making $7.15 an hour, being the only one working in your house. Now, granted, we were in a great situation where we were living in a family-free house. Our family had gifted us a little house, and we were able to not have rent. But even then, it's very hard to even make those minimum bills on $7.15 an hour. Mm-hmm. So you're working 96 hours a week. So that's 4 straight days, or maybe 3 days with one split, however I worked it out. But I can remember standing at the scheduling lady's desk at this particular company I worked for, and it was always first come, first serve. So I would be standing at her desk waiting for that schedule to drop so that I could pick up all the overtime that I could possibly get my hands on, because we needed it. And that was my mentality. And I took this mentation of, I have to work. The other stuff's not important. So there was a lot of things that I intentionally missed because I didn't want to be in the mix. There's a few Christmases that I worked. There's a few Thanksgivings I worked on purpose. Now, if it falls like that, that's fine. But I didn't know how to prioritize my own life. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for people in fire, EMS, public service, whatever it is, even healthcare. Like, the other stuff's important too, because I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. You're not going to take any of this crap with you. What you are going to leave when you go is a legacy and memories with your children, and hopefully with the general public. But most importantly, you're going to leave this legacy and these lasting memories, because one day we are all going to be nothing more than pictures on a telephone and the stories people tell about those pictures. For our generation. And the generation before us was that, and you probably have seen it, the wooden box or the shoe box full of pictures. That's what everybody's life kind of gets compressed down to. So I didn't have the mentality that any of that other stuff was important. I prioritized work. And to be honest, I can remember there was a time in my life where I actually thought to myself, do I love this more than I love my family? And I couldn't honestly answer it. And thinking back on that now brings me guilt and shame in a sense, but at the same time, I was in a different place in life. There was no way that me and my ex-wife should have. Now, clearly God had a plan, but logically, there's no reason my ex-wife and I should have had a baby at 22. Like, that was not something that was planned. It just kind of organically happened, as it does. And it was just out of the blue, and we were not prepared for it. Thank God for our families, because if it would not have been for them, my kid wouldn't have had anything because I barely had money to scrape by. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, we with my ex-wife, we only had the one child, my oldest, Liam. He's 8. He'll be 9 in March. But it's kind of the same thing. We didn't even have our own place for the most part. Now, we lived in Oklahoma for a year, so I could live with he lived in Oklahoma at that time. And we moved to Oklahoma for 1 year so I could live close to my dad. That was the only time that we ever had our own place. And I remember rent was only like $350 a month there. Now there's you can imagine the kind of place that $350 a month you can imagine the kind of place that $350 a month would get you.
Oh yeah.
Gunshots every weekend right outside my bedroom window.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But so we get back to North Carolina, and at no point in time during, like, whenever we were, still together, did we have our own place back here in North Carolina. We always lived at her grandmother's home. And as tumultuous and as toxic and unhealthy as that marriage was, because of them, we had a roof over our head. And I was the only one working. Oh my gosh, I've worked for 13 different companies since I got out the military, or 12 different companies since I got out the military.
What branch were you in?
Army.
Okay.
Yeah, I did radio ComSec repair in the Army.
Oh,
just small electronics, nothing crazy.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. With the comms and the
mic. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, look at us. We're sitting in front of mics, and you're a comms guy. Well, that makes sense. You just follow the train there. That may not be what you do for a living, but the comms stick. I was in radio many, 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 many years ago. And it kind of was one of those things that hung on to me a little bit. So podcasting has always been one of the things I wanted to do. I never knew how to get started. And my co-host Kim at A Silent War Within, man, she just motivated me one day with just enough. And I'm the type of guy that if you get me close to the edge and you give me enough of a little push, I'll jump by myself. You didn't even have to push me off. I'll just take off running if you just put it in my head deep enough. And that's exactly what happened.
I love podcasting. I really do. I started out with trying to make video gaming creation, where content creation with video game, and I tried to get that to work, and I just could not get it to click. And now I don't even hardly play video games. I think yesterday was the first time I played video games for more than 10, 15 minutes in probably 2 months. I'm doing this now.
Yeah, the best part about the podcasting for me is just like, look at you and I. You just shot me a random message on TikTok after seeing one of my videos, and here we are podcasting together. Like we get podcasting is like the outlet to meet so many people and have such genuine, real conversations. And I'm all about that kind of thing. Like I love this format and this, just this back and forth. And it's not, I'm sure you've got little bullet points and things you want to talk about, but it's not a rigid script. Like if you're doing, say we were on a TV show, it'd be a very rigid script. Or if I had my dream job and I was a WWE superstar, hey, I'd have a rigid script to go by. I hate to break it to my fellow WWE fans, but it's scripted, but I would have a very rigid script to go by. I always wanted to be a professional wrestler long ago. I thought that was yes, son. Hang on. He had phone problems. Sorry about that. You can edit it out.
No, it's fine. Fine.
Yeah.
But I just really love the podcasting format.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I've met a lot of really cool people. I'm not going to announce it on this episode, but I do have another guest that I'm really looking forward to. I'm waiting on him to email me back for scheduling. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Really excited for
we have had
this one.
Good luck with our, guests. We have had people just respond to us immediately and people with 250,000, 300,000, 400,000, social media followers. I'm like, who am I to these people? Like, I'm just some dude, but they're always just as down to earth as you and I. And I guess you get this false sense of like, oh, they're celebrities. No, they're just normal people who started making TikTok videos. Like, that's it. And they just popped off. So I guess I kind of had stars in my eyes the first time I interviewed somebody. Oh, and oh God, we interviewed a guy named EMS Avenger. And the very first time, we barely knew how to work Riverside. We barely knew how to work any of the audio equipment. It was the most awful thing. And I emailed that guy and I was like, hey, do you mind coming back on the show? He's like, sure, I'll do a follow-up episode. I said, no. I want you to redo that episode. And he was so nice. He's like, yeah, it was kind of rocky, wasn't it? I was like, yeah, a little bit. I said, we got it figured out now.
Yeah. Luckily, Riverside is relatively simple.
Yeah.
It took me forever to make a decision on which service I wanted to use. Riverside's what it is now. I don't know if it's what it'll be forever, but it works for now.
Yeah, it works out. I like it. It does fine for us.
So, we when you were deciding on how you wanted your podcast to be structured, what you wanted the content of it to be, now, obvious, granted you are, you're a first responder, so you have experience with that, but you dive into the mental health aspect of it. And I'm really big on mental health. This show is primarily geared towards men's mental health because I don't hear very many people talk about it, but especially in my age group, the 20s. I'll be 29 next week, so but people my age definitely don't talk about it. So what inspired you to do what you do with A Silent War Within?
So, all right. So deep breath. I try to forget the year, but somewhere around 2010, 2011, we responded to a house fire. I was on the ambulance side of things, and we get there, and this mom is outside, and it was the first time I'd ever seen somebody be truly catatonic. Lights on, but nobody's home. They're just checked out. And she wasn't screaming. She wasn't having any response. And somebody came up to us from the neighborhood and said her kids are still in there. And it's hard to describe, but there's a feeling in the pit of your stomach that just knows this is going to end badly. And so the fire department gets there and has, probably half of this house put out, and we run in. And which was stupid from a safety perspective because we had no protective equipment. We just knew kids were inside. So we let our tunnel vision and adrenaline get the best of us. But we ran in, and the little boy that we found did not bother me single bit. He died right there in his bed, still covered up, just like he never knew he was in a fire. The little girl made it about 3 feet from the door trying to get out. She was reaching for the doorknob. And that just, for whatever reason, other than it being a child, because those always had bothered me, that just wrecked me. And it changed the way that I was at work. It changed the way that I was at home. I'm a believer, and there's studies to prove this, that the chemical makeup of your brain begins to change when you have so many traumatic events back to back to back. And that's kind of the story of EMS. Like, we get called for everybody's worst day, and you do see a lot. Some of it you don't think bothers you, but it's the buildup. It's the one on top of another. It's bricklaying. Think of it that way. It's just brick and mortar, brick and mortar, brick and mortar. And it finally gets to the climax of what it is. But my partner looked at me and he said, "You're not the same. You need to go see a doctor." And over and over and over, he told me this for 3 solid weeks. I finally go see a doctor, talk to somebody about it. He puts me on an antidepressant. No real counseling follow-up. There's no critical incident stress debriefing that happens at our company. You're just kind of out there on your own. And after I dealt with that and got on the antidepressants, about 3 months go by and I'm like, God, I feel great. I don't need antidepressants. It was the antidepressants making me feel so good. So I stopped abruptly and never went back. Just, this is how life is supposed to feel kind of mentality. And then in 2018, I had a kid. Well, I didn't know it was a kid. We got dispatched. This is kind of a long story. Sorry. So we got dispatched with an unresponsive patient. The county I worked in, I swear everybody in the county was unresponsive because that's the only complaint dispatch knew how to take. It was just unresponsive after unresponsive, no matter what it was. And so we go, lights and sirens, and we're almost there. And I hear on the fire department radio that's in our ambulance. Now, we've been responding for 20 minutes way out in the middle of nowhere county. And I hear the fire department come over the radio and go, do you want us to bring this kid to you when you get there? Immediate stomach to my toenails. Because I'm the kind of paramedic, and still am today, who likes to be very prepared. So I would have a piece of tape on my leg if I knew I was going after a pediatric patient. I would have all the dosages of medications and approximate weight of that age group and things like that. So I always wanted to be prepared so I could just take a quick glance and know exactly what to give and not have to do any mental math on the scene in the heat of the moment. Because those are where mistakes are more likely to occur when you're in the heat of battle, if you will. And man, this kid got him, did all the right things. It took me years to say we did the right things. But, you know, I could have probably gotten away with pronouncing him deceased on the scene. But because it was a kid, because the parents were there, I worked my tail off. I did everything I possibly could. And it did not end well. And he wound up donating his organs, and I was able to find out through some backdoor channels that a couple kids got to live because of his sacrifice. And if there was any silver lining, that was it. But again, completely in a place that I didn't know I could go to. I didn't know if this was for me anymore. The parents praised me as this hero, and I felt like anything but a hero. I felt like I'd done everything wrong, even though I had not. Like I said, it took years to get to say that I didn't do anything wrong. But I felt like I'd done all these things wrong. I felt like I had not responded appropriately, this, that, and the other. I mean, it was just 1,000 thoughts, and none of them positive. So I kind of pushed my way through that with my own will and kind of just, whatever happens just happens, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. So I kind of repressed all that, buried it, which is the trait of first responders and healthcare in general. We just repress. We just shove it down further. But eventually there's nowhere to put it. And in 2020, I had a phenomenally huge blow up to the point where I scared my wife and child. It was 2021. Yeah. Cause Malachi was old enough to kind of have a reaction to Dad being angry. And I was outside and we had some silly confrontational little spat. Well, it wasn't even any kind of big fight about anything relevant, but something about it just triggered me. And I felt this wash of just heat and anger and rage and immediate sweats. And I just start beating the crap out of my shed outside. I mean, I still have a dent in my shed, and I'll probably never remove it because it's a great reminder for me. Every morning when I walk to my car, I can see that dent that I left in that shed and know that this is where transformation started. And they left the house, and because they were scared, and for rightfully so, I would have never hurt them. but it was my actions, and it wasn't toward them. It was just my actions that they had never seen before. And they were like, hey, we got to get out of Dodge. Like, this ain't going to work out. This looks like it's going to go south. And I mean, sure, I get it. But after we came back, my wife told me something is wrong with you. And by that time I had spent, a solid hour on my back porch by myself and just sitting with my own thoughts. I think that's something that we, as men, we try to push off a little bit more than we should. There's something almost therapeutic about first thing in the morning when you start your day, just giving you a little bit of time to sit with your thoughts. And that idea always just scared me to death, because who knows what was up there? Like, I didn't even want to know what was up in my head. And the moment that I started listening to myself, I was, and this sounds silly, but in my own mind, I was a small child that was just crying for help. I needed somebody to say something, to do something, to make this overwhelming feeling go away. So that day, after I scared my family, I said, I immediately found the first trauma-informed counselor that had worked with first responders and booked the first appointment. I mean, when can you get me in? Like, it was one of those calls where they probably thought, oh, this guy's coming in, we might have to lock him up. This guy sounds like he's really nuts. But I go, and it was such a non-judgmental place that counselor approached me from. She never made me feel like I was less than. She never made me feel like, even though I know I had done something wrong, she never felt like she was condemning me in any way. And as I kept talking to her, and it now it's turned into what I call my weekly work dump, or my biweekly work dump. I go there and I complain about this person, this person, this person. Well, the beauty of a counselor is they don't know any of those people. They don't have any connection to those people. So it's to bring out an old Southern saying, they have no dog in the fight. So that is very therapeutic to me in that way. But I think that was the start of my own personal mental health journey. And then 2 years ago, I went to a mental health conference, and they had all these big sponsors there that were talking about first responder mental health. And I watched guys that would be the kind of guys that I would look up to. I watched guys that I looked up to just break. And it was such a refreshing thing for me. I was like, you're messed up too. It's not just me. Wait a minute. I thought it was just me. Because it is, when you're dealing with mental health stuff, it is such a feeling of isolation. And that's what we say every show. Know that you're not alone. We made this show so that first responders and healthcare workers that deal with the same kind of struggle that we do. My co-host, her name's Kim. She's been a respiratory therapist for the last 13 years, a majority of it being in pediatric transport medicine. And that's a whole different world. That's a mix between the hospital and EMS. And when we get nurses and RTs in those positions, it is very eye-opening to what EMS does. And it's kind of a shock factor. And she had a traumatic childhood too. Her story is not mine to tell, but it's the same kind of story. We all had this traumatic childhood. We all had these trauma events happen in our lives. And she's phenomenal. And what really started the show is, so I came back from that health conference, started our peer support program where we both work. Kim and I have been working together for the last 10 years. So started that program, started that outreach, got, trauma-informed psychiatrists, counseling, what's the other one? Chaplaincy, all those folks involved. And it just kind of blossomed into something where, so it started off being very structured. And one of the things that it's kind of blossomed into is that we wound up kind of changing the culture of the organization around mental health. Now, it's not one person reaching out to another. It's all of us making the conscious effort. If dispatch hears a team run a bad call, they're going to put them out of service for 30 minutes to an hour so that they can catch their breath. And they're going to reach out to them, and I'm going to reach out to them from a leadership standpoint, and other people are going to reach out to them. We just kind of changed the culture. So Kim had a really, really, really bad child abuse call, and that's in this area, that's more so a thing than anywhere else that I have personally worked. And she has this. She's very bothered by it. Kim's not one that has usually been bothered by a lot. And she reaches out to me and she's like, Kevin, I don't know what's wrong with me. She named off all her symptoms, and I stopped her and I said, you're not depressed, because she kept saying, I'm depressed. I said, you're not depressed. You're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, that's what this is. Every sign you just named is textbook for what it is. And so we talked for really off and on for 3 or 4 days about this call and her feelings and her family, and really got, I mean, you talk about a rabbit hole. We went down the rabbit hole that I didn't even know existed at the time. And it all started because I was open and I was there for her and I was inviting, and I did not judge her, because I've been there too. I had no room to judge. And as she started to open up more and more, after 4 or 5 days, she was like, God, I feel better than I felt in months just talking to you. And she said, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And I was like, well, it's something I've always wanted to do, but I wouldn't even know where to start. And she said, let's just do it. Just like that. Let's just do it. And that's all the motivation I needed. It was 20 minutes later, I'm sending her pictures of all the Amazon stuff I had ordered, mics, the lighting, the 4K cameras, like all the things that I had ordered, banners for my office. We had artwork within an hour, like that kind of thing. It was just bam, bam, bam. Because I'm the kind of guy, like I said, I'll jump off a cliff. I'll go. So clearly, by that Amazon shopping cart, I do not make $7.15 an hour anymore. Thank God.
What a story to experience just so much trauma. And I mean, I'm sure just about every first responder has, and healthcare worker. My wife is a nurse too. I can't even imagine. You know, y'all, like you said, you're there on people's worst days. You're seeing them at their absolute worst and or their most desperate time of need. So honestly, to hear that low of a salary or hourly pay, that makes me sick, bud. I'm telling you, that makes me sick.
Oh, I started there as an EMT, and once I went through the year and a half of paramedic school and got out of paramedic school, my very first paramedic job. Now, this is trained to save people's lives, like drop breathing tubes, do advanced procedures, push over 50 to 60 medications. So you think like, oh, this is this is kind of the mountaintop. I started at 1263.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, in rural Mississippi. Now that's gone up since 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, I started my very first paramedic job for $12.63 an hour.
Oh my God. 10 years ago, that wasn't enough to oh my gosh.
but 10 years ago, I thought I was standing in high cotton, as they say down here. I thought I had just won the family farm, because my overtime rate was like $18. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best money I've ever made. I mean, it was wild.
That is wild.
Now, if you offer me $18, I'm like, you can't afford me, boss. Nope.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna keep on stepping.
Yeah, for sure.
That's, even though I'm not a first responder, I never have been. That is something that inspires me personally, that particular story, because I am a big advocate for mental health, and I'm on this journey to understanding even my own, just as a man, as a dad,
Yeah,
as a stay-at-home
absolutely.
dad for one. So I'm on this journey of understanding and trying to elevate my knowledge on these things, and those kind of stories really do inspire me. So before we go any further, just thank you for what you do. Seriously.
Well, I appreciate that. And if anybody's watching this, if you see a first responder out, we enjoy hearing thank you. This is kind of a thankless job, and sometimes it's late nights and hard calls, and very few people, you'd be surprised, actually say thank you. So we do enjoy hearing that. If you see somebody out, just to share a little joy with those folks, just walk up to him and say what he just said. I appreciate what you do. That means the world to us.
Like you said, it's a very thankless job. What my wife, or what our wives do as nurses, thankless. It's very
Same thing.
thankless.
Yeah. Yeah.
My wife works on the cardiothoracic unit. She gets a lot of the like the post-op people, heart transplants and things of that nature. A lot of it, cardiothoracic surgery. So she gets a lot of those really sensitive patients that are coming through. And she has some stories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just from that, and it's not like the ICU or nothing like that, but there's still some really intensive stories that come out of what she does. And I always make sure to tell her, like, you're doing a really good job. And the people that
Yeah.
she works with, they say the same thing. She's a really good nurse, really caring. And so I try to make sure to even let her know
Yeah.
frequently
Yeah.
that I'm very thankful for what she does. So, because a lot of what people do, it's thankless, especially
Yeah.
what y'all
You're
do,
exactly right. You're exactly right.
especially what
Health
y'all do.
Healthcare as a
And
whole, first responders, all those folks, it's just thankless. I mean, but we don't do it for the thank yous. It does make us feel good when we get it, but that's not why we do it. We do it because we care about people.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So moving on from that and kind of just going back to fatherhood, one thing that I wanted to dive into is the mental health of fathers. So just, I don't know if you saw my most recent episode,
I did.
of being a stay-at-home dad.
Yep.
One of the things that I have really struggled with being a stay-at-home dad, especially when I think about what the Bible says about fathers and what men are supposed to do according to the Bible, I have really struggled with my own identity, because I go from being a hardworking plumber, bringing in good money, to that all just kind of falling apart. And I wasn't making a whole lot of money anymore. And then it made sense for me to stay home and my wife to be the one
Yeah.
to work. And just conversations that I've had with other guys, other dads, a lot of people seem to not understand how I can just, not work, when in my opinion, what I do is a different kind of work, and then
Absolutely.
I'm also, trying to be creative with the podcast, but I have
Yeah.
really struggled with a lot of my identity since becoming a stay-at-home dad.
So I think part of what you said is very important to remember. Like, there is a sense of achievement and work and fulfillment when you see your children strive in the right direction and make those little successes. One of the most beautiful things that I've gotten to watching my son grow up from the time he was born until 5, is watching him discover the world. And I wish I had all the time in the world to watch him discover the world, because the grass that I think is just grass is something new and exciting to him at least once. The potted plant is something he's never seen before. I pulled out a rake today to go get his airplane out of a tree that he's got this little remote control how to train your dragon thing, and he got it stuck in a tree. And he's like, "What's a rake?" And it was one of those things where I'm like, kid don't know what a rake is. So don't lose your identity because you're a stay-at-home dad. Value the moments, because what you have is something many dads don't have. You have the opportunity to love your children the way Christ loves his children, and the way that we're called to love our children as dads. You have the opportunity to show that so much more than a working guy like me. Don't take that as maybe a bad mark in your corner, because it's not. I think you've just been given a broader opportunity to love your kids, to raise your kids in the way that, and especially, men are so. The thing that I heard long ago that really stuck with me is women will hunt after their dads, people with qualities like their dad, and boys will become men like their fathers. And you have the opportunity to show them what a man looks like. Have your daughters chase after a man of integrity. Have your daughters chase after a man who cares, a man who is gentle, yet has the potential to be extremely protective. And one of the things that I think that we've lost in the sense of manhood is we have to be, and this is going to sound worse than it is, we have to be capable of some form of violence. And I don't mean violence like we think of, but we have to be able to fiercely protect our family if it comes down to it. And I'm a big self-defense guy, but that's not the road that I'm going down here. It's just being so fervently passionate about your family that you're willing to do anything for them. You have such an opportunity to show your children what that looks like. You have so much more opportunity to show them what that looks like and how that feels, because those ideas come along with this feeling of I'm wanted, I'm loved, I'm accepted. And that's the opportunity that you have. I don't think that you lose your identity over that. And I know that's something that is easy for me to sit here and say because I've not experienced that. But that's the thought process when I think about you and the situations that you describe. Like, that's what I think about. You have such an overwhelming opportunity to show your kids what love looks like from a man's perspective. And for me, I didn't get a lot of that as a kid. I was raised by, at the time, a 65-year-old former Army vet that that was my great uncle, and he was just hard and he was gruff and you did what he said and there was no questioning, and that was just, and I don't know about you, but I don't particularly want to raise my children that way.
Yeah.
I want them to be able to question and come to me and talk to me about things be comfortable talking to me about things that are hard or that hurt, or for them to be able to come out and say, like, Dad, I'm not good today. Thankfully, my dad and I have that kind of relationship now, but he would have been incredibly uncomfortable, and so would I have been at 14 years old if I came to him and said, Dad, my mental health's not good. Or, my mind's back then, I don't think we didn't have the whole mental health discussion as much as we do now. But he would have been very uncomfortable. I said, I don't know where my head's at. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't feel right. One of the conversations that, because of the time management that I have, taking a different role and being more present at home, like you have the opportunity to be, one of the conversations I'm so proud of is that, and my daughter's going to be super embarrassed. I don't care. I love to embarrass her anyway. We were on this trip and she kept going to the bathroom. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, can you explain why you keep going to the bathroom? We haven't eaten anything odd. Like, what's the deal? She's like, I don't know. My stomach's just hurting and nothing's happening. I was like, well, where's it hurting at? And she pointed to her lower abdomen. And of course, her mom had kind of taken care of that whole female coming of age conversation, but she hadn't explained the symptoms that come with it. So she was comfortable enough for me to sit down and have that conversation with her, which my sister, who lived with the same folks I did would have never come to my mom and said, hey, this is what's going on. So I kind of took a little bit of pride in being able to explain those things to her and have that conversation, her being comfortable enough, or her talking to me about boys. Like, you've got an opportunity to set up so many relationship builders that will last for years to come. And you have the opportunity to have a best friend who's also your child at 30, like my dad does. And that's something that you should look forward to. Yeah, it is, I can only assume, but I'm sure that it's very weird going from being a hard worker and now you're just kind of at home. But I've watched many, many people do it, both men and women, stay-at-home moms and dads. I know both. And they make that their job and they make that their commitment. And I think that you being willing to do that shows that you have obviously zero commitment issues, which is great. But taking that on as a role also shows strength and courage. And being courageous is one of the things that the Bible is very open about instructing men to be like, we have to be men of courage. And I think that that's what you're doing. You're taking a step into something that's very unconventional in times past, and that's okay. I think that that is framing your kids for a very, very good life. Because remember what I said at the first part of this podcast, like, nobody's towing a hearse nobody's towing a U-Haul behind the hearse. I'll get it out in a minute. You can work all this time and you can make all this money, but if you lose the only thing that matters, what was it for?
Yeah.
Like, our kids should be the most important thing in our lives, only second to our wife. And that's a biblical principle for me, is that it's God, my wife, my children. Because no offense, but when these kids walk out the door in 20 more years, it's going to be just me and my wife staring at each other. These fools will leave. They don't want to stay here. They're going to want to go do their own thing. So, I mean, that's just my words to you, to take it on as something that you should be very proud of. You're giving them an opportunity to know what a father and a husband look like on a day-to-day basis. Because I can sit back and say, oh, I had a great father, but I don't know what he was like for 10, 15 hours a day. I don't know what he looked like. I didn't know that side of my dad until I was older. Thank God, because he was rough. Some days he was rough. He's a truck driver, you can imagine.
I've gotten better. He was a truck driver. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have gotten better with it, and I've been at it for a year and a half now, and I've gotten a lot better with it. Like I said in that episode of the podcast, I've gotten past the point of explaining myself to people, and I think that's where I was going wrong in the beginning, because I was like still in the process of convincing myself that this is what I wanted to do, that this was the right thing to do. And I also mentioned briefly that I asked the question of, after all, isn't a real man supposed to be whatever his family needs him to be, right? Mm-hmm. That was one of the things that I brought up. No feedback on that yet in the YouTube comments, but and it's also provided me the opportunity to do something like this podcast. Before, whenever I was working that job, I wasn't able to do these more creative things with podcasting. And but back on topic here, I'm just really appreciative of my wife for agreeing to this, and we both mutually decided for me to be a stay-at-home dad. And I wish more couples would talk like that, like me and my wife do. We're very open with each other. It certainly didn't start out that way. No, it certainly didn't start out that way. But fast forward 6.5 years later, my wife and I are very open with each other, and it's created a very positive atmosphere inside of our house. Yeah. And that's something I didn't have in my previous marriage. And I'm definitely miles ahead. I'm a completely different human than I was when I was with my ex-wife. I was very angry. I was very littered with just very negative emotions, kind of like what you had
Yeah.
done, disconnected. I'd be gone 14, 16 hours a day, however many hours I was working. I'd come home, give my son a hug, go hop on the Xbox. And that's what I did.
Oh yeah.
Nothing else mattered. Nothing else mattered. Not the other person that I was with, and certainly not my kid. And that's just the
Yep.
truth. I'm very open about that. But that's just the truth of it. So, and one of the biggest things that I don't hear men in general, but definitely fathers, we don't talk about the the challenges that we've had to face and that we've overcome. And we don't talk about the mental health, or, like, we don't talk about like our mental states of whatever it is that we're going through. And that's one of the missions of this podcast, is to just get more regular guys talking. You'll hear the world-renowned therapists, the Harvard-educated, give their scientific ideas on this stuff. And it brings me back to, do you know who Dwayne Knoll is?
The old guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have seen his videos. I didn't know his name, but yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, real scruffy looking beard and everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Always in denim.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
He said something that has stuck with me for, and this is, I'll just give a brief synopsis. Essentially, for men to be their full, complete selves, there's 3 aspects of their lives that they have to be in tune with, or that they have to nurture, right? That men have to take care of. That's their physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And in my opinion, the spiritual health of a lot of men these days is really, really lacking.
Absolutely.
You don't get a lot of people reading their Bibles no more. And again, I'm not the greatest Christian to ever walk this earth, but I do.
None of us are.
Yeah, but I do try to incorporate biblical values into my life. That's how I was raised, for one, and it's starting to, what he is saying is it's starting to ring true for me. You got the physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health, and if you don't have all 3 of those things, you're not going to be a very peaceful man.
And it absolutely does, because I can tell you, from, I guess it was 2022 onward, I got on a physical health kick, and the man you see here before you today is 143 pounds less the man that I was in 2022. I was freaking huge. First off, I look back at pictures and I'm like, who's that guy? Like, but that helped. The spiritual health thing has always been, so, and I don't know if you experienced this, I'll just be transparent. I think that we as men have seasons that we kind of go through where we're really on a high and we're really doing everything like we're supposed to go, supposed to go to church, supposed to read, supposed to do all this stuff. And we're really like on fire. We want to do it. We know it's the right thing. And then we go through seasons where, like, Lord, where are you? I do not see you anywhere. I don't, to be honest, and I say this to follow it with something. So before, you get that ugly YouTube comment, listen to the whole thing first. And this can be one of those quick clips for you. So sometimes you can talk to God and say, I don't feel you. I don't see you. I don't want to read about you. I don't want to talk to you. Sometimes you have those feelings. The beauty in that is that God is big enough to hear that too, and to listen with an open heart, and to know where your frustration is coming from. He's a big enough God that he can take your frustration. He can take your anger. I mean, when you look back at Psalms 51 especially is one of my favorites that David wrote. and it's after he gets caught with, after he gets confronted about his affair with Bathsheba. And we're talking about a guy who is literally called a man after God's own heart. And what we find is that he is just completely broken. And then 5 chapters later, you see another Psalms from him where he's frustrated. And if you read all these Psalms, and even in Job, and even in other places in the Bible, and even Paul, one of my favorite scriptures is, 2 Corinthians in chapter 12, 7 through 10. Paul takes a day off. Paul writes to all these churches, and Paul finally takes a day off. And I say that loosely, but Paul takes a day off and takes the opportunity to write about himself. And he says, because of these surpassingly great revelations that have been shown to me, I've been given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan. I want to tell you, he didn't tell us ever in the rest of Scripture and the rest of this writing what that thorn in his flesh was. I think he left it blank for a reason. I think God intended it to be blank so that we could throw our own in there and use the rest of this verse for ourselves. Paul goes on to say that I pleaded with God 3 times to take it away from me, and God responded with, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And he goes on and he says, therefore I'll boast all the more gladly about my sufferings, about my hardships and all these things. You got to look at this guy's life. I mean, he's imprisoned. He's shipwrecked. He's beaten. They tried to crucify him at one time. Like all this stuff that this guy goes through. And that's the only time he wrote his frustrations, but God was big enough to hear it. And God was big enough to say, you know what? I get that you're frustrated. I get that you have a thorn in your flesh. I get that this is hard, but I want to tell you that growth has never come, my growth, my personal growth, and no other Christian that I've seen, growth never comes on the mountaintop. Growth always comes in the valley. If you go to a mountain range right now, the greenest grass you'll ever see is in the valley. And part of that is because that's where we go. That's where the water runs down to, because those plants need that water so badly. If it wasn't for the elevation on both sides, it would never get there. And like, God's big enough to hear all this. God's big enough for us to say that, we're not doing very great at this Christian thing, but I think people have drifted so far away from even that. Dads and husbands have gotten so far away from even being able to admit we're frustrated and talking to God and just having that back and forth sometimes. We see all throughout the Bible these people who share their frustrations, share their joys, share their angst, share their worries, share everything with this God that was, before Jesus came, this God was essentially invisible to most people unless you were part of the tribe of Israel and you started seeing all these things. Really, there was not the evidence there. It was just faith from what ancestors had told and the events that ancestors had told. And even now we're kind of back in that place where we're not walking around seeing Jesus walk the earth and touch somebody and heal their sight, or making the lame walk. We have to believe somewhat on faith. And I think that we've gotten away from that conversation of being honest with ourselves and going, if I am so intricate, and let me tell you, the education that I've had to do to be a paramedic and to be a critical care provider and to do all these things is extensive. To me, it seems extensive. To a doctor, probably not. But, and all the things I know about the Bible, about the body, sorry. Two B words right there together in my head. All the things I know about the body, every time I study it, I just fall more in love with the Creator, because there's no way that this ball of cells that we call our body functions the way that it does unless somebody put it together that way. And I think we've gotten away from realizing whether we had a father, whether we had a good father, whether we had a bad father, we have a fantastic Father in the Lord. And we've fallen so far away from realizing that we are the created being and we should call out to the Creator. I think we've just fallen away from that. And it's so refreshing when you come back to that and you say, oh, wow, he loves me even through my fault. He sent his son to die for me, even though I was dead in my sins. And that just opens up a whole new thing. And then just take a minute and look at your children and just think about the first time you held them. That love is nothing compared to what he has for us. And if we just sit back and reflect on that a little bit, I think some of our focus begins to shift and change a little bit. But it's all about that time that you choose to set aside and just sit with your own thoughts. Sit and talk to God about your thoughts. Why do I feel this way? And you may find out some things about yourself that even you didn't know. So that's just my spiel. That was
I
long,
love that.
like everything else I've said.
No, I love it, and one of the things I promised you was that I am an active listener, and that's true. I am.
You sure
So,
are.
I try to. I'm so passionate about elevating my understanding on these things, and one of the questions that I have for you is, do you think that one of the largest reasons why we have the type of mental health crisis as a whole that we do have, do you think a lot of that can be attributed to a lack of people putting our creator first, putting God first, and and really adhering to the word and the gospel?
Absolutely. And the reason that I say that is because over the course of my life, I can look back, and if I take the transcript of my life and I put it beside the Word of God, and I look at what those two things say together, and I look at the parts of Scripture that say God's going to guide my life, that there's purpose in everything, and one of my favorite verses of Scripture is one of the last verses in Genesis, where, and I've shared this before, but it's just, man, it just opens up so much. Joseph, we all know the story. His brothers sell him into slavery over jealousy. He goes into slavery. He winds up getting imprisoned. Pharaoh's wife tries to sleep with him. He runs out, gets imprisoned again. Then he goes and interprets some dreams for Pharaoh. And kind of over the course of time, now this is obviously loosely the Kevin translation. Over the course of time, he gets to be Pharaoh's right-hand man. He's the second in command for all of the land of Egypt, right? And we see this, and then this great famine falls over the land. And a couple of years go by, this famine, and all of a sudden there's these guys at his doorstep, and they're begging for food. Well, Joseph recognizes them as his brothers, but they don't recognize him. And when Joseph finally reveals himself to them, he utters a phrase that just completely changed everything I thought about and the way that I framed a lot of other scriptures. And he looks at his brothers and he says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And when I take the transcript of my life and I set that next to that scripture, I can look back in almost every horrible event. I can find God's will and purpose in that somewhere. And I can also look back and solidify what I said just a few minutes ago. It was in those valleys, those hard times, that I grew tremendously, that I learned what it was to be a good man, what it was to be a strong man and a courageous man and a God-seeking man. I didn't learn that when I was at church camp at 17 years old, when I was way up here on the mountaintop and everything felt great, man. Yes, Jesus, and I had the experience there, but the growth came when I got back home and I wasn't on that mountaintop anymore. And the first bad thing happened and you felt like you had nowhere to turn. And then all of a sudden you remember that mountaintop and you go, oh, yes, I do. And then the growth starts to happen. So I think that mental health is directly connected to that, because when you put those transcripts beside each other, you start to see that, okay, I'm not as screwed up as I thought I was. Just recently, I went down this rabbit hole, as I sometimes do. I'm in ministry school, which is not like seminary. It's just a very intense college Bible study course, basically. You get credit hours for it. And one of the things that they were talking about was some of those verses where Paul talks about taking joy in his trials. He says this numerous times throughout almost every book or every letter that he wrote. And one of the things that it alluded to was like, right now in my life, dude, we are in one of those valleys. Like, the washing machine's broke. I call her my mom, but she's really my great aunt. She lives with us now, the woman who raised me. She's in bad health. You know, my wife's grandmother had a domestic situation that she had to get jerked out of her house. And we're doing all this now. I got 2 bathtubs, or a shower and a bathtub, that need to be replaced. Water heater goes out, like all these little things. And my wife and I are starting a Bible study group ourselves. I'm in ministry school. We've devoted our lives to church and family. I started a podcast that is all about making people better and giving people a safe place to land. And when I'm reading all this about Paul being joyous in his trials, I'm like, I don't feel very joyous some days. Matter of fact, I don't feel any joy about any of these trials. I don't like this. I don't like having bills that come that are unexpected, like 2 showers. Like, this is not fun. I don't find this fun, much less joy. And so I go down this rabbit hole, and I get to Luke 22. And if you know anything about Luke 22, Luke 22 is the Last Supper with Jesus. At the very end of the chapter, it goes out with him going into the garden to pray. Well, during this Last Supper, we see the disciples are doing what the disciples typically do, and they're arguing about something. And who's the greatest? Jesus kind of calms that down. Well, at the end of it, he looks at Peter, who has not been called the rock that he's going to build his church on yet. He looks at Peter and he says, Simon, Simon. Now, this is his old name. Keep this in mind. When Jesus uses Peter's old name numerous times through Scripture, it's reminding Peter, you're being your old self. You're not being the new creation. So he says, Simon, Simon, the devil has asked me to sift you like wheat flour. And because of this sifting, you will bring strength to your brothers. And Peter, being Peter, says, no, I'll go with you even to death. And Jesus says, you'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And of course we know it happens. And through this, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, this valley, and we're trying to do all this good stuff. And, the old adage that Satan's attacking me. And I started thinking about that. And all week now I've been saying, babe, we're being sifted. We're like wheat flour. We're being sifted. And of course, finding things like that amplifies my mental health just another step, because now I can put a name to it. Now I can put an ideology behind it. Now I can say, you're not going to get me today. I know what you're doing. Not today, Satan. Not today. And I can have that joy that I'm sure Paul felt at some point about what I'm going through. So yes, mental health is absolutely 100% connected to God's word. And I think it was meant to be that way. We are, again, the created creature that searches for a relationship with the Creator. That's nature. As a boy, the only thing I wanted was a relationship with my mother and my father. And I didn't have that. Now, granted, I had 2 great fill-ins, but it wasn't the biological connection that you feel. It's the same thing with Christ Jesus, because we are drawn to the Creator. When you feel that void in your life, that's what that is. It's that you're drawn to the Creator and you keep trying to fill that gap with something different. Turn to the Creator. I'm not saying that this is a fix for the mental health, but I'm certainly saying this is a contributor to the overwhelming mental health crisis that we currently live in. Because if you look at it from a broad standard, we're all jacked up. Like, if you look at,
To some
especially
extent.
to some extent, because if you look at it, especially after COVID, man, mental health took a plummet during 2020 because we were stuck in our houses looking at ourselves in the mirror going, what am I supposed to do now?
Yep.
You know, it was rough. It was rough.
When when you talk about the creator, the way that you were, and I don't know why this is where I was thinking about, or why I was thinking about this as you were saying that. But one of my favorite things to do is go hunting. I love hunting.
I used to too.
The biggest reason why I love hunting is, one, the time of year that it is. I love fall and wintertime. I always have. Especially after my 3 months in Kuwait, I will always appreciate the cold weather.
What?
But whenever...
Sorry. Here.
Wow, you're
No, it's okay.
cool. You're cool too.
Hey, buddy.
Mom, I don't want to be a firefighter.
I'll be in there just a little bit, okay? Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Hey, if anybody gets it, it's me. But whenever I'm sitting out there in the woods, in a stand, in the blind, I'm there before the sun comes up. I'm there before the world wakes up. And I said this in a previous episode as well, but this is how passionate I am about it. Anyways, I'm sitting out there, and a couple hours go by, you're in the blind, you can hear the birds start chirping, you hear the squirrels rustling around, and you can literally hear and see all of nature wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that comes to my mind is what I'm witnessing right now demands a creator.
Absolutely.
It demands it. The order that is in nature, right? Just the order that is in nature demands a creator. And there are times whenever I question my beliefs and I'm like, man, I don't know, because like you had said earlier, God, where you at? I don't feel you. I don't see you in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And this, that, and the third. But when I'm out there, that's when I feel closest to God. And the same thing goes for fishing too, but especially hunting.
You're literally witnessing something that is not just like you, but in the same realm as you. You are witnessing his creation. Yes, you are his creation too, and you are special to God in a way that bird or those crickets and all the things, all the sounds that we love, all those animals that make those sounds, and the sunlight coming up. You are more important to God than the sunlight itself. You are his most valued creation. And that is something that just blew me away when I finally realized what that meant. That he loves me enough that if the sun faded away, he would choose me over and over and over again. And when I get to doubting, because I think that's a natural thing, I think we do go through certainly hills and valleys of this doubt, whether it's an outside influence from the world or whether it's something we experience that kind of throws us off track a little bit. I think it's natural, and I think we see that even in the 12 disciples. Throughout Scripture, you read their stories, and there were times that they had doubt. There were times that they didn't necessarily deeply doubt, but just thought like, God, what are you doing? Like, numerous times they would question Jesus, like, what are you about to do with these fish and this little bit of bread? There's 5,000 people out here. What are we supposed to do with this? And they're freaking out. The storm on the sea. They wake Jesus up and he looks at them and says, ye of little faith. Because we're not built to have the understanding of what God's doing. So sometimes it's okay to bring those frustrations and bring those doubts. And I completely relate to you saying that that you feel close to him in the woods. That used to be one of my favorite times, especially as a struggling teenager and young adult, was to be in the woods, because I felt so close to God. Because like you said, I was watching his creation wake up. I was watching everything come to life. And it just reminded me that, God, you are amazing to have created all this and make it work in perfect. It just works in perfect sync with everything else. If you watch it all at one time, it's just like everything just works.
It makes
And
me emotional.
Yeah, and it's the same for me with the body, because, I'm a big body nerd, and because that's kind of my career and what I've spent the most time in, just watching the way every organ has to function together. And when you learn about it, you're just like, there's no way that there's not a creator that had a bigger plan in mind that all this stuff works together, because it just, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, right? When you think about it like that, it's hard to believe that we just crawled up out of the ocean at some point.
I don't buy it.
So,
I don't buy it.
No, I definitely. I've shed a tear before. I'll be honest. I've shed a tear before being out there, and just just like goodness, thank you. Just good Lord, thank you so much for this.
Yeah,
and that's why. That's why hunting season ain't long enough. Goodness, it ain't long enough, because you only get a few months. You only get a few months to just get out there and enjoy it like that. And it's one of the biggest reasons why I look forward to the time of year that we have that's coming up, because I know I'm about to have even more heart to heart with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that. Firmly believe that.
I get it. I do.
And, I told you off camera here that I'm not I'm not ashamed of my faith. Not at all. I'm also not overly open about it either. And I'm coming out of a valley, as you had mentioned it, right? Mm-hmm. So the past, since we had moved into this house back in March, we were in this valley with me and my wife. And we're coming up on the other side of it. And this will be the last thing that I bring up based off of what you had said before, but it's funny that you had brought it up the way that you did. The grass is greenest in the valley, and you learn the most through that valley, and that's where your character builds up. That's where you improve as a man, or as a person, as a parent. And goodness if that ain't true, because I was going through it with me and my wife in that valley, and we're finally coming up on it. And as you're going up that mountain, you look back and you're like, well, the old me's down in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you just take those steps to the next level here. So
you do.
But hey, Kevin, thank you so much for this. Seriously, thank you so much for this conversation.
This has been for me, we had Shade Tree Cardiology on our podcast, and we talked probably about 10 minutes longer than this, of course, on this app that you and I both use for our podcast. It's got a ticker up at the top that shows you the recording time. And we've had an hour and 40-minute long conversation. And the whole time I watch it, it's just a habit of mine, because I have a kind of a goal that I want every episode to reach. And after it reaches that particular hash mark, I stop watching it. Washing it? What? That was real Southern. I was washing it. But yeah, it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this. This has been fantastic. I don't care if this gets 10 views or 10,000. I really have enjoyed talking with you.
I have absolutely. Same here. This
has felt like two old friends catching up on FaceTime. That's what this has felt like.
Right? Oh, I'm telling you, it was just one of them things. I really do think that the good Lord above linked you and me up on purpose.
Absolutely.
For a reason.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And this conversation
100%.
being that initial reason. So Other than that, I don't have any more questions other
Hey,
than
man.
just the two that I ask everybody.
What's the
Is
two?
there any
Hit me with it.
questions that is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wished I would have? If there was, how would you have answered it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. Give me a few days and I'll be like, God, should have said that.
Well, all right. Okay. Well, good. The last question that I always ask everybody is, "What's next for you?" Period. Right. What is it? What's your next step? Where that could be professionally, personally, mentally, emotionally, however you feel like answering that question. What's next for you?
So, of course, the shameless plug comes in here that A Silent War Within is our current project and hopefully our longtime project that we continue to work on this. New episodes get released every Friday. It's on all the major streaming platforms and also on YouTube. But one of the things that is next for me is I'm pursuing my master's degree for even more leadership. Some days I don't know why. Like today, I don't know why I'm doing this. It was just a rough day, and I'm like, oh Lord, and I gotta do it all again tomorrow. Hence the bag. I mean, I feel like watching the camera. I got these huge bags. But really just further my education, but also being somebody that people feel like they can trust, not just about mental health, but about spiritual matters, about all those things that I'm genuinely passionate about. But especially with A Silent War Within, we want people to have a safe place to land. We market it to first responders and healthcare, but at the same time, I think there's just like you're not a first responder, but there's been nuggets of this that you can pull out. And you may not ever worked a kid drowning, but the way that I handle that may have a nugget in there that you can find. So it's really for anybody that wants to listen. Like it's out there on the interwebs, as my boss says. It's out there on the internet, so anybody can listen to it. But that's our current project and long-time project, hopefully. But definitely the next plans for me is to keep going in this leadership journey, keep getting better at being able to have conversations like this that are partially scripturally based. I mean, our whole conversation was about that, but being able to share. I never have liked the sharing the gospel thing, and I don't walk up to some dude on the street and go, "You're going to hell, dude." That's just all there is to it. That's not how I do that.
I'll leave that up to my grandmother to say all that.
Yeah. But
she will.
I will walk up and go, "Hey, are you hungry? You want something to eat? Come on with me." And then it's an opportunity for me to tell them my story, because every one of us have a unique and individual story, and all of them have something that we can learn from. So I love stories. I think continuing to hear stories from our guests on the podcast, as well as people that I just meet in random, is one of the biggest journeys of life that I'm on. I love to talk to people. It drives my wife insane. As you can well tell, I like to talk. And everywhere we go, I'm talking to somebody, and it just drives her up a wall. But that's really the next step for me, is to just continue to improve. I don't think there's ever a day where I'll stop learning or improving.
Well, I absolutely love that, and I love your podcast. By the way, I like the guests that you've had on there.
Well, thank you.
I'll comment on every one of them.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
But other than that, I think that's going to pretty much just about do it. Everybody over on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and please go follow A Silent War Within over on YouTube as well, and the other major podcasting platforms. Other than that, this has been a fantastic episode of the Man Mode Podcast. And Kevin, thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you.
Alrighty. Well, y'all have a good one.